Good evening and welcome to the Legion Cantina. In today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing all the bounty hunters that are available in Star Wars Legion. So, bit of a different one, not faction specific, just going through all the units that have access to the bounty keyword. So not including old Boba Fett, for instance, because he doesn't have bounty, even though he is probably what some would term a bounty hunter. But yeah, just any units that have access to the bounty keyword. I have kind of split them up roughly by faction, so we're going through the Rebel ones first, then Empire, then any remaining ones in Separatists. But yeah, to kick off with a unit I've talked about before, it's Din Djarin, and he is still really strong in the game. Incredibly consistent in terms of the output he can offer, and I think ultimately, like, unless there are like drastic changes in the way either the game is constructed or the way that Din is kind of priced, I think he will continue to be a really solid unit for just the foreseeable future. His role is kind of up close and personal, so he tends to excel in sort of range 2 and closer. He can do a bit of work at range 3 actually with that blaster pistol that puts out 2 red and a black. If you've got access to an aim, you can be firing off at range 3, and then generally with Din, you're probably getting access to at least 1 or 2 aims, so that can actually be a pretty dangerous shot at range 3. In sort of the way I tend to build him, it will normally be taking the Flamer, the Jetpack, and the Beskar Spear, and then there's kind of a few sort of flexible options in there. Mission Objective, I think, is pretty strong on him. He has pretty good access to red dice, whether that's on his basic blaster, his Flamer, or the Beskar Spear, and I think in general, if you can be looking to re-roll red dice with that mission objective, it is a really useful thing to have, because then it's normally adding a hit, well, on average, with that surge to crit. And then that you can take things like emergency transponder if you want to as well. He tends to not be that order hungry, so emergency transponder can be a pretty decent take. Situational awareness isn't also the worst take either, and if you're really going all out, then up close and personal can kind of work with his arsenal too. Flamer, blaster pistol, and so on. Another thing that he's good at is with that Flamer and with his ability to, kind of combine those weapons with his arsenal too. He can threaten multiple units at once. Like, that Flamer is terrifying to the sort of the larger squads. I've had him wipe full clone squads before with a blaster shot combined with his Flamer. And also, he can handle, Jedi up close with his blaster pistol and the spear if you're taking it, or the Amban. Like, it's very common to put sort of 4 or 5 hits through on a Jedi, which is pretty decent, and obviously you don't need that pierce, so you can spend your aim to make that attack more consistent. Another thing that makes him really strong is, well, he's a Mandalorian, so getting those red surging saves, and I think, especially with the Beskar Spear, and if you have that dodge to give yourself the immune pierce, obviously Impervious is great, but that immune pierce kind of takes it up to that next level. You're generally tougher than most Jedi are in melee, and he can really absorb hits pretty well. Even if you don't have the dodge, the Impervious is pretty decent. So if you want somebody to kind of clog up a Jedi for a turn, an Anakin or a Vader, for instance, then Din is a pretty good option. And especially if they can't finish him off, that's really frustrating for them to deal with, because then he's trapped in melee, he's safe, he has that sort of versatile pistol that can shoot out and things like that. So he has some options if you do want to dive him in and try and clog up a Jedi for a turn. As I've kind of spoken about, he has that amazing, I think it's probably the best independent in the game with the aim 1 and the dodge 1, just exactly the kind of things you need. And again, means that if you do have, a Bad Batch, an Ahsoka or a Luke or something, that they can actually take those orders preferentially over Din, and he'll probably be okay. Like, that survivability combined with the damage output that those aims enable is just really strong. Tactical 1 is a super nice ability to have, like, especially if you are playing his Relentless 1-pip, for instance, that can just be really nice to increase your consistency. Like, those 2 aims just go such a long way if you're diving in with your Flamer and things like that. So he is just kind of the full package ultimately, Din. I've spoken about him before, and continues to be just a really strong build for me. I generally bring him around 130 points, but if you want to spend up to 140, you'll still get pretty decent value from him. And the final thing is, Grogu is fun, but I think still too expensive. I've kind of spoken about this before. I think if Grogu came down to 12 points, something like that, you'd start to see him being taken a bit more, because he does just effectively provide that extra wound to the Mandalorian, which is pretty nice. So they do have to be careful, I appreciate, about how they balance him. But yeah, I think Grogu, great for theme, but not necessarily competitive yet, but not a million miles away. And I think they're if he does ever see even quite a minor buff, it might actually just be enough to tip him over the edge and make him competitive. In terms of his command cards, his 1-pip's great. Speed 3, into Relentless is phenomenal. There's also shenanigans you can pull off with new ways to motivate them with Vader. If you can seize initiative on Din, and this is in Empire, then you can suffer that wound, and you take tenacity on Din as well, and you can obviously, jump into melee, deal a load of damage. So there are really good ways for sort of Din to cross that gap, which, especially when you've got jump 2 in your locker and that speed 3, it's just really nice. You can go without the jetpack, but I really don't understand why you would do that. I think there are then better options for that kind of around 100 to 110 point unit that Din then becomes at that point. So I would always bring the jetpack if I'm taking Din. I think it just gives you too many options and too much of a threat range to ignore. His 2-pip's weird. In the absolute dream scenario, it's great. I think your ideal is you're probably in melee with something, and then you punch it and shoot it, and then you hopefully kill it, and you punch it and then kill it, and then you can shoot and then flame her out or something. Like it's a little bit of a mess, this one. It's quite sort of tricky to pull off, and again, for a 2-pip that takes away Din's independent and doesn't necessarily have the highest upside, I'm not the biggest fan of this. So I think this is a kind of leave at home one for Din, unfortunately. And then Whistling Birds, it requires an action, and that makes this tricky. When action economy, I've spoken about this a million times, when action economy is as important as it is, having to do the speed 3 to set this up, and then you only wound on sort of 3/8 of the time on that white attack die. Yes, if you can hit multiple big enemy units, this probably does get value, but what big units are you hitting ultimately that have enough to justify this? I guess like Mega B2s maybe, or a clone Mega Squad. Like, yeah. But again, you're giving up Din's independent, you're giving up all your order control for this quite situational 3-pip. So obviously in the ideal scenario, it is really strong, but I don't quite see it personally. And I think it requiring that full action is maybe just a little bit crushing, unfortunately, but it's not dreadful, and in the right situations it can be good. So I think definitely his 1-pip's the strongest. Then I think the 2-pip and 3-pip are kind of, if you want them, bring them, but I don't think they're sort of one of like a motivating reason to bring Din necessarily. Moving on to IG-11. At the beginning of the game, I was convinced IG was OP, and then gradually there's just been this like slide back, and now he's fine. Like, I think he's kind of middle of the road in terms of both theme and power. He basically he's got his gunslinger, so he can shoot twice with the same weapon, and with the sort of bounty programming that you can take, you can effectively just, on average, with the 2 black and the white, it's like 1.5 hits on average. And then if you're doing that twice, you bring up about 3 and a bit on average. So you're generally good for between 3 and 4 PS2 with Sharpshooter 1. So you're probably good for, 3 or 4 wounds a turn on average. And if you got the aims and things like that, because you generally probably have the actions to spare, then yeah, it's fine. It's fine. He's a backmarker unit who will just do very consistent damage pretty much every turn. And that's kind of all there is to say for me. There is the opposite spec of IG, where you focus around his 3-pip, which is the sort of self-preservation. Is it self-preservation? Oh, sorry, anti-capture protocols, which just he turns into a big bomb that blows up. And also worth noting, if you take the bounty programming, that would also get PS1. So it can be really strong. But I'm still not. I've tried it a few times, and even with like the e-stims and the repair and stuff like that, it is just a bit fiddly, and I don't know if it's necessarily worth it. Like, you really need your opponent to be quite sort of clumped up, essentially, and yeah, I'm not a huge believer. So it's fine, and IG's fine. I don't think he makes a list worse ever, but as I've spoken about before in the Rebel Operative slot, in order to take IG, I think you have to pass on too many units. And I think to an extent that's also true in Empire, like, especially with the advent of Kallus coming into the game and being really quite strong and good value for points, it just made it that bit harder to take IG. But he's not bad, and you know what you're getting. Either way you build him, you're either going for that really aggressive early play, or you're sitting him further back and he's just plinking off units every single turn. Other things that are nice, he's not very order hungry. Like he doesn't have an independent, and you don't really need him to have one. And as a result, you should be aiming to engage your opponent as far back as you feasibly can, essentially. And on like a shifting priorities or recover the research. I think if you want a unit to just sit on kind of maybe your home objective or one that's off in a corner and still be able to put out some really effective damage, it's not a bad take at all. But for me, I think especially in Rebels, your operatives often need to be the ones making the big plays now that Sleeper Cell aren't as scary as they used to be and Pathfinders aren't a thing. I think you need your operatives to be more proactive than what IG is bringing, and I think you could also argue the same in Empire. I think more gunline stuff in Empire is not necessarily what you need from your operatives. I think you need a Din or a Kallus or something, somebody that can get in, make some plays, and make stuff happen. So maybe that self-destruction version has more legitimacy now, but just not one that I like to play. Yeah, and I think the way I'd spec him would just be the bounty programming, and then maybe Hunter if you really want some aims. But there's nothing wrong with him just literally just bounty programming, nothing else. And then at 110 points, he's pretty good value. His command cards, Mechanical Carnage. If you can get this off at the right time, especially if you're then looking to go anti-capture protocols, maybe the turn after. I think there's something there, and I think being able to in that range 2 is a pretty reasonable distance. Like some units just shoot that far anyway, but if you can do 1.5 PS1 to say 4 or 5 units at that range 2, it's not bad at all. So I think there's something in this card. Again, I'm not the version of IG I play, so sometimes I leave it at home, but sometimes a nice one to, like, especially if you are sitting further back and your opponent's rushing an objective, suddenly having this command card ready to go and just fire out a load of damage can be a bit of a surprise, a bit like, Bossk's Darksys Mines, for instance, like just something that might take your opponent off guard a little bit. So not a dreadful command card, not an amazing command card for me, but I think, again, in the right situation, can be pretty decent. His 2-pip, weirdly, sometimes the best time to play this is on turn 1, just to guarantee you're going to be able to shoot. You'd hope to be able to shoot anyway, and sometimes, I used to take recon intel on my IG, for instance, just to get him that bit further forward. But yeah, this is just a very decent take, and getting a free aim is nice. Getting that demoralized 3 is nice. There's some standby shenanigans there potentially, for instance, and steady never hurt anybody. Like being able to go, speed 2 onto an objective, like. Especially, again, if you're going for that more aggressive IG, maybe this is like a turn 2 play, for instance, so you can still shoot as you're charging in to go for your anti-capture or your mechanical. Like, there is a sort of progression there, but again, just not the style of IG that I personally enjoy playing. And then already mentioned anti-capture protocols. Nice that this is a free action, so that is something you can have in your locker, and being able to just blow stuff up with some Pierce in a decent AoE isn't bad, but I think if you are moving your IG in a certain way, your opponent will probably see this coming and either divert away from you, or now I think dice pools are probably big enough that they might be able to blow IG off the board in one turn, so you may never be able to get this off. I think also with the IGI run where he sits further back and just plinks, this does feel like a bit of a hindrance. Like it's a 3-pip you don't really want to take, and especially when there aren't like amazing 3-pips in Rebels necessarily, but having to take this and giving an order to a unit that you don't necessarily want to order when you might be running a Din, a Luke, Sabine, Ahsoka, whatever, you don't necessarily need IG to be getting that order. So it can be a build around, but for the ones I run, not so much. Moving across to the other IG unit, IG-88, used to be the better one, and I think not so much now. Essentially, with the way that cover used to work, Arsenal 2 used to just be a really strong keyword because you could just combine his weapons together and you'd only have to deal with cover once. Still true, but now cover isn't such a big deal, so it's not as important, and you don't get access to the bounty programming, which gives that range 4 weapon Pierce, which means in order to be getting that Pierce, you have to be that bit closer. And range 3 is actually a range that most units are comfortable engaging, so it's just not quite as impactful. You can still, shoot at one unit, shoot at another unit, but you won't be getting the same quality of dice pool, and you'd only get PS1 on one of those weapons, so it's not quite as good. I think IG-88 is essentially IG-11, but a little bit worse, and without that kind of consistent every turn output with the PS that you do see from IG-11. He has permanent command cards, which are nice, but my question is with those is that one of them's a 1 pip, one of them's a 2 pip, and in order to get value from permanents, you need to be playing them relatively early in the game. So are you playing them turn 1, in which case you're guaranteeing going first, in which case is it worth it? Probably not. Are you playing it turn 2 and giving up a lot of your order control to give a sort of permanent effect to one of your units that isn't necessarily going to want that many orders? I don't know. It's a bit fiddly, and they used to be better in sort of the previous version of the game where it felt like you almost had more time and those permanent command cards had more time to get that value. Now I just don't think it's as strong anymore. He does have solid melee. That PS1 is always nice on that rainbow, but again, it's probably 2 PS1, like it's nothing special. And also, this isn't a unit that's designed to be in that melee, and you don't want him to be in that space, and especially without the mechanical carnage and the self destruction protocols. It's just not, you don't have the tricks that IG-11 has to kind of maybe deter your opponent from coming that bit closer. So yeah, I don't think that melee is relevant really for IG-88. As I said previously with IG-11 though, the Armor 1, the Impervious and the Red Saves are all very decent, and unless you're getting hit by really big dice pulls, you're probably not that worried about it. Like the Armor can shrug off 1 and then maybe rolling 3 with Red Saves, which is 1.5 wounds, and that's not too bad. So yeah, you can quickly kind of sort of reduce those dice pulls. And also droids are nice because they are easier to repair and heal effectively with those astromechs than generally medics are. So that could be a nice combo, if you've got like in Empire, you've got Del Meeko at the back, for instance, alongside IG, and he takes a bit of plink damage, you can just heal that straight off him. So that can be really nice. And I think, yeah, IG-88 is going to do a consistent job, but lacks a bit of the sort of damage output and even perhaps the versatility of IG-11, so just perhaps not quite as strong for me. And as I put here, I just don't think he's the best option in Empire. I think you have better choices out there. So I've put him at a C. I just think generally you can do better than taking IG-88. Spoke about his command cards, so I'll go through his independent programming first. So basically, if he issues an order to himself, so it's easy initiative or a command card, you get an aim. Otherwise, independent dodge, not bad. Effectively, you can think of that as just removing that hit per turn if you're getting shot, which you may not get shot. You want the aims from this essentially because you're not that worried about getting shot. Hopefully, if you're playing IG-88 correctly, like you should be engaging at longer ranges and probably not taking that much damage. Focused on the kills, not bad. It basically lets you sort of keep going that bit longer, which can be quite impactful. And might even, let you get that bounty off, which is quite nice. If you're running double bounty, I think this is quite a nice one to have around because it just might get you that extra VP if he sticks around that bit longer and gets that attack off. So if you're bringing IG-88, probably try and fit this card in. But yeah, it's a I don't think it's a compelling reason necessarily to bring IG-88, unfortunately. And then already talked about the 2-pip with IG-11. Same thing goes for IG-88, just doesn't quite have as much upside necessarily with IG-88 as it did with IG-11. For my IG-88, I would, again, it's Hunter and targeting scopes probably. I think Hunter is always a tricky one and kind of pushes you towards targeting a certain unit, which you may not always want to do. So perhaps not, but definitely a targeting scopes with that Arsenal 2 going on. Also worth noting, the Surge to Crit is not bad. Like, that does give you options into armor, might let you probably pull 2 crits on average if you're arsenaling 2 of his guns together, so that's okay, and it might have PS1 on it. Just a slight upgrade over IG-11, but yeah, again, I don't think as impactful as you might hope it would be. Moving over to another Empire unit that has bounty, it's Kallus. I'm a big fan. I think he's effectively the Empire's version of Jin, and the same stuff that goes for him, goes for him. Like, he's cheap, he's pretty tough, and he can handle himself in melee against even Force users with that immune melee pierce. Like, I think that's something that really is strong in the game right now. Like, whether you're resisting, a melee attack from the Mega Clone Squads or Anarchy Invader, like all these kind of things, that just having that immune melee pierce might just let you survive for one more turn is super valuable. And again, because he's only generally going to be coming in at 80 points max realistically, that is a really good use of him if he's able to bog down a big Force user or a Mega Clone Squad or something for a turn. Like, can't be mad at that at all. He has just a really useful toolkit. Like Observe Two's nice, especially in a gunline list where getting those extra rerolls on, a black surging dice, for instance, can be really nice. He also has synergy with his 3-pip on that Observe 2, which can be, again, decent synergy with that sort of suppressive shenanigans that you can pull off. And yeah, I think he's not there to do damage in the same way that Jin isn't there to do damage, but if you can use if you can use him as a roadblock and even chip off a bit of damage against a force user, because if you're charging in with that red and 3 black with the critical 1, you're probably good for 2.5. Yeah, 2.5 I think it is on average, which sometimes force users aren't getting red surging saves, so it might even be good for a wound or two, and that is super annoying to deal with, like when basically he can like equalize against force users in that way, but you could pay upwards of 150 to 200 points for a force user and you're only paying 80 for Kallus. That feels like a really positive trade. Direct trooper unit is also a really nice thing to have. There isn't as much synergy perhaps as there used to be with this. Like you can't do like the comms relay shenanigans anymore, for instance, that might have made this a bit stronger, but it's a nice thing to have around, and a bit of order control early in the game is always nice. If maybe you've got a core unit, a flamer or something that you want to bring on maybe that bit later, or even if you're doing the shore trooper thing with a bit of aim synergy there, sort of down to that mortar, then again, not bad at all. So just a really cheap, useful piece to have that actually also brings some decent command cards with them as well. So is 1-pip, hold the line. That's surging both ways for Riot Squad enjoyers, and yeah, he can just lock someone down for a turn. And I think if you don't have other units that are super like order hungry and are gonna need an order on them desperately, this is a pretty decent take. And again, you're not taking this for the damage particularly. You're taking this to really bog down an enemy unit and kind of force them to play around you. Perhaps a little bit similar, but not as good as like the old Commander Luke, I'm a Jedi combination, where this is something that is really going to frustrate a sort of larger squad that kind of forces you to deal with Kallus, and especially if he's got those red surging saves and the immune melee pierce, they might not get through him that efficiently. Like a Vader, for instance. An aim swing might only do 5. Kallus probably saves 3 or 4 of those, so Vader could be limited to like 1 or 2 wounds against a 70-point unit, which feels really bad. So yeah, a nice command card to have around. Same with ISB investigation. This is just a really useful piece to have. Like if you know that there is likely a certain opponent's command card that's going to be coming down in future turns, and you know what pip it is, like this is kind of a card that rewards a bit of player experience and knowing what's going to come. Then just shutting that down for a turn and giving you a bit of time to deal with stuff can be really nice. For instance, like Han 0-pip, you can take that away from your opponent if you know they're running Han and it might be coming up soon, and that could shut down like a trusted agent play onto Luke where they were banking on going first and stuff like that. So some really nice bits of synergy in there potentially for Kallus. And then I spoke about his sort of observe token synergy with his 3-pip, and yeah, getting a bit of suppressive while getting the reroll is also pretty decent. So yeah, again, like not a phenomenal command card, but the fact you can order any 3 units you want is also quite flexible, so you're always bringing this over the basic assault, and yeah, offers again something that offers a nice little bonus on top of a basic command card. So probably one to bring unless you've got Vader in your list, for instance, in which case you have to auto take 3 pips. Boba Fett, the terror of the previous version of the game, when Sharpshooter 2 was literally better than every single other keyword in the game, which is an exaggeration, but it's also partially true. Now, he's just a bit too expensive. I think generally with the kit on him, he's going to come to like 140-ish, and when you can see like what 140 points can get you in the game now, he's just not quite the force that he used to be. If I had to describe him, like he's kind of in that mid-range with his blaster, like he wants to be shooting kind of at the edge of range 2 would be the way I generally describe it. And with 5 surging to crit black dice with Pierce 1 and Sharpshooter 2, you're probably good for 3 Pierce 1 on average, depending on if you've taken an aim or not to increase that consistency. And yeah, he's just a very consistent source of damage. And when damage wasn't as high in the previous version of the game, that was where he excelled, like being able to do 3 or 4 PS1, if you took that aim consistently, used to be like pretty crazy, whereas now it's not as scary and not as like impactful as it could have been. So I think Boba is just showing his age a little bit. Still got the jump 2, still got the Arsenal 2. He's still a Mando with the Impervious and the red surging saves and all that stuff. Like, he still does what he's always done, and with his command cards as well, he can really offer something to an Empire list, but I just don't think he's quite as compelling as he used to be. And I think definitely Din Djarin, for instance, has definitely overtaken him in terms of power and value for points. His independence, fine. Like I like the choice. I like that depending on the situation, you kind of pick. Like, if you're in melee with a force user, probably take that dodge. Otherwise, you're probably going for that aim because he has some really nice high quality dice pulls. And also, if he's stuck in melee, you can do your boot spikes and then you can shoot the blaster out. Like, you have options. So he's never like completely like stuck. He can always do something useful, and he will generally survive, one turn of tangling with a force user. He won't probably survive the second turn, but that one turn he can probably clog someone up for a bit if that's what you really need him to do. And yeah, I think just a bit expensive. Like, if I think if he came down to like 120 or something, I think that would be fine. You could even push him to 115. I think it would probably be okay. But yeah, just not quite the sort of powerhouse that he used to be. Still really like his theme, mainly due to those command cards, which feel really nice. But I do think his power level's probably down to a B now. In terms of his command cards, his 1-pip's okay, lets you hold on to your independent, which is a much bigger deal for the Rebel version of him than for this version. This is fine. Yeah, you can bring better 1-pips than this. Essentially, there will be in any Empire list, unless you're literally just running Boba and a field commander. There will be better 1-pips you can run than this one. Specifically, Whipcord Launcher, which continues to be an absolutely phenomenal command card. Basically, you can just lock someone down for a turn, and especially if you've done the thing I said previously, where you've kind of clogged up a force user for a turn. Maybe you survived on like 2 HP or something, I don't know. You play this 1-pip, you hope to go first, then you immobilize them and you give them the suppression, and then you just jump away, and they can't move unless they got burst of speed, in which case maybe they're maxing out at speed 1. And you've just locked them down for a turn, and that can just be really good. The alternative is you play this before you get engaged, and you could maybe just do like a speed 3 whipcord and then speed 3 away. And again, there's just not a whole lot your opponent can do about it. And having the ability to just lock one of your opponent's units down for a turn is really powerful. And yeah, does it to any trooper unit in the game. So really powerful, great one to bring. And if you're bringing Boba, you're nearly always finding a way to squeeze this one in. His Whirlybird 2-pip, ever since he lost his Flamer 2-pip, yeah, it's okay. I personally don't feel like this is an auto take. If you don't have any compelling 2-pips, then this is okay. I think it feels better on old Boba, I would say, just because this goes at the end of the activation. You could do speed 2 in, get the 2 aims from tactical, which increases your consistency on this one. So maybe there's something in that one, but yeah, just not that compelling, but probably better than, the 2 generic 2-pips if you're looking for another command card to take. Jetpack Rocket, again, if you don't have any compelling 3-pips, I'm not a huge fan of this one. I think giving up a whole turn of order control to get this attack off is just not really what you want to be doing. Like, yes, you can combine this with his 2 black surge to crit as well, which means you're probably putting 3 through against armor, maybe 4 if you're lucky, but just doesn't feel great. And yeah, you could shoot a unit and take it away with blast, but he already has sharpshooter 2, and his old version has sharpshooter 1, so I'm not a personal believer in this one. I don't think it's one I would really run with Boba. And then Rule with Respect, one of my favourite command cards in the game. Absolutely love this one. I think it rewards positioning, I think it rewards planning ahead, and I think it rewards building your list in a way that can synergize with what Boba is trying to do. And I really like it. I think it's well balanced. I think it provides something definitely to Empire that they could really use. Just taking that gun line and giving it that extra bit of firepower is super nice. So big fan of this one, and doesn't work quite so well in Rebels anymore, but also worth noting that this is units, this isn't trooper units, so it works on anything. And that can be really nice. There are some FAQs in terms of like how it works with split firing and multiple attacks in a turn and stuff like that. And in general, it doesn't work with Gunslinger, for instance. Like you can only get this on one of your dice pools during the turn. So that's kind of a little bit of a. It doesn't work with IG-11, for instance, which was my dream combo, where you get like 3 black and a white Pierce 1 twice, and I thought that would be really powerful, but it doesn't quite work like that. So yeah, it's fine. And if you're bringing Boba, try and squeeze this one in if you can, because it's nearly always worth an inclusion, especially if you're running a gunline list. Moving over to Bossk, another kind of gunline, sit at the back kind of dude. We've hit quite a few of these in the Bounty Hunters. But yeah, I've got a real soft spot for Bossk. I love a unit that just has a very clear role and just does it well. The key to Bossk is Surge to Crit rifle with Pierce 1 and Suppressive. In general, I would just take targeting scopes. You can take Hunter if you want to, but you don't have to. And you can just sit at the back and generally, even into heavy cover, because you're pulling so many crits with Bossk, you're probably putting like 3 Pierce 1 through every turn at range 4, which is just really nice. You can buff it up with command cards, which I'll talk about in a second. And yeah, he just offers quite a lot, I think. So yeah, not a very nuanced character, but doesn't need to be, and is always going to kind of give you the same thing every game. He's not that tough. His regenerate 3 is okay, I guess. Like if you take a bit of chip damage again, maybe you heal that off. His independent surge 2 is not really worth gunning for. Like again, you're hoping not to roll that many saves with Bossk, so don't worry about not giving him orders in order to preserve that independent. Yeah, Enrage 3 and his melee can be decent. Like getting Pierce 1 baked in into what is more than a rainbow, like you're probably hitting for 2.5 Pierce 1, which isn't terrible. And with an aim or something, maybe you could get that to the full 4 Pierce 1. But again, not something you really want to be doing with Bossk. That's kind of not the reason you're running him in a list. Yeah, and the other niche, well, not even that niche thing, but the other thing with Bossk is he's pretty good against armor because you're generating so many crits with those 4 white dice and that red. You're just likely to, again, probably put 3 Pierce 1 through against armor. And, being able to deal 3 wounds, which is what that probably is on average against armor, is really strong. So, yeah, he just offers a lot. And I think he probably isn't the playmaker again, and if you are in a faction, I would definitely say like Empire that probably needs maybe a bit more of a playmaker in its operative or its commander slot with Vader, for instance. Maybe not so much, but if you already have playmakers in your list, like maybe, I don't know, some riots or something even, then it's okay for him to sit at the back and just plink away. So yeah, I put him as a solid pick in both factions. I think he's a B, just pretty average, but yeah, he is very consistent and will just offer the same thing to your lists. His Merciless Munitions is a very interesting card, and I kind of spoke about the advantage. One of the advantages of IG is he does have those cards that kind of can be a bit more threatening to units that come close, and if an opponent does come up close to you with quite a few units, having this just ready to go is pretty decent. It's an average of 1.5 hits per sort of dice roll effectively, and it also gives that poison token as well. So after they activate, they're probably taking another one. So it's not unreasonable to say this is kind of 2 wounds a unit on average, which is really good. Like against Mandos, for instance, or Force users, things like that. Like this can be really strong, and you're not getting cover, you're getting the crit too. Like, there's a lot to like about this command card. It just does rely on your opponent coming close. So maybe you're holding this in your hand as a utility some of the time, but your opponent will probably guess it's in your hand again, unless you're running a Vader, for instance, where you might want both of his 1-pips. So it can be a little bit of a surprise sometimes, but yeah, a nice one to have if you don't have any sort of auto take 1-pips from your other characters. Reptilian Rampage, he can basically attack twice and suffer a wound to perform a move. So you can suffer the wound to perform a move and then attack, and that's really decent. Like, doesn't give you the aims, unfortunately, but hopefully you can make them spot those over, or if you've got Hunter, you might get one from a damaged character and things like that. So basically getting aims on Bossk is really good, and if especially in Empire, a faction that does really well in gaining aims, and actually, to be fair, droids with the strategize from Kalani don't do badly either. Like, they're really valuable on Bossk. So yeah, if you can get a couple of aims on him, this card can be absolutely lethal. And then lying in wait, I'm not such a fan of this one. I think spending a whole 3 pip to probably put 5 PS1 on a unit is fine. The sharpshooter one here is always funny to me because you're essentially hoping to rip 5 crits off this. So maybe again, if you're going for armor and you want just 5 straight crits PS1, it's not bad. But I kind of would hope a 3 pip would do a little bit more maybe than this one does. So while it will give him probably 8 or 9 aims or something, and you probably will get that 5 PS1, it's just what happens to the rest of your army while Bossk is lying in wait that is sort of cause for concern. So yeah, it's a decent one, but probably, for me at least, not really what I would want a 3-pip to do. Cad Bane, he's a box of tricks, and I have put him actually. I think he's one of the most thematic units in the game. I really like what Cad Bane offers in terms of his utility and just the way he kind of interacts with what your opponent is trying to do. He excels in kind of the mid-range duels, so he wants to be in range 2 for his piercing blasters. He wants to be in range 2 for his blaster pistols with that sharpshooter 1, surge to crit PS1, and he has that steady as well. So with that jump, you can just jump up, do a steady attack, and then climb back down if you want to, and things like that. Like the ability to play around line of sight blocking terrain with that action economy is just something that's really useful. And you, with that danger sense 3 and the dodge 2 and stuff like that, you don't necessarily have to go early in the turn. Like you probably have enough survivability to survive most of what your opponent's going to be throwing at you. So that could be a really nice sort of trick to have in your arsenal as well. Courage 3 is always decent, and as I've seen, having played Pathfinders and casting quite a lot, Danger Sense can sometimes actually be pretty clutch. So yeah, I think a really useful thing to have around with Cad, and especially given some of the synergy it has with his command cards as well, that can be a really useful thing to kind of build up that that Danger Sense on him. In terms of how I would run him, it depends if if you're planning on running him close, but the gauntlets can be a pretty decent take, and again that immobilized 3 is just so brutal to deal with, and then when you can jump away, yeah. And there's also tricks you can do in terms of if an opponent bursts of speed if an opponent uses bursts of speed to get into you, you can just jump away for free without even having to attack them because they'll have an immobilized token. Yeah, and then so I'd probably take the gauntlets and then transponder, probably situational awareness, just because you can have good dodge generation with Cad, and then duck and cover, which brings him in at 125, which isn't cheap but isn't stupidly expensive either, and you'd hope to be able to get enough survivability and objective play from that build. Essentially, you just want to avoid massive dice pools with Cad. He's good at avoiding sort of small repeated iterations of damage. You don't want to be dealing with a hit from a clone mega squad, B2s. I was about to say a force user, but actually he probably does okay with his independent dodge too. I'm thinking of Vader comes in, swings for 5, say he dodges 2, then 3 pierce 3. He probably takes 3 wounds, which it's not great, but it's also not terrible. So yeah, dodge 2 is always a nice keyword to have, and especially when it procs off independent. In terms of his command cards, so his 1-pip just gives him that bit more survivability. I don't know how often you'll need to be attacking twice with Cad, but one thing you can do with this is because you've got that steady is you can move, shoot, and I think that probably works fairly well in terms of getting off an extra 3 PS1 or something, which is probably what his blasters do on average. Might be close to 2 and a bit PS1, but yeah, it's a nice thing to have around. And is it worth a whole 1-pip? Maybe. There's also stuff you could do with the gauntlets, maybe, where if you punch someone with the gauntlets, move away and then steady shot them or something, they're not going to be able to come and get you. So there's definitely tricks, as ever with Cad, that you can play to try and sort of frustrate and confuse your opponent. I'm in control basically lets him remove his suppression tokens to use them to kind of immobilize enemy troopers. You can only give 1 immobilize per enemy trooper at range 2, but given if you're taking duck and cover and you have that synergy with the danger sense, you can quite easily stack up 2 or 3 suppression, and the fact that it's any number is pretty nuts. Like it's not uncommon on Cad if you plays correctly to know you could hit 3, maybe 4 suppression and give out a bunch of immobilized tokens. And the fact you can also give an order to another unit with this as well is quite nice. If it was just Cad, I think it would be a little bit weaker, but that ability to give that extra order out is quite nice. So Yeah, a nice utility to have and something your opponent will be aware is coming, and probably they will need to think about playing around that with their sort of melee and more up close and personal units. And then his I make the rules is basically at the start of the game, you put down 3 tokens. One of them is Cad, one of them is a blank, and one of them is a pretty nasty booby trap. Like, that is a pretty effective mine. And again, it's probably good for, I think that's 3 hits on average from those mines with that critical Thor as well. So not something your opponent is going to want to trigger. And yeah, it messes with your opponent because Cad can appear near any of them and can appear really close if you want to as well. Like, you maybe don't want to necessarily, but yeah, it will play some mind games with your opponent. And nice to be able to have this for free at the start of the game with that divulge effect as well. So something to be aware of. And the final unit that does have access to the bounty keyword is Ventress. You are required to take the sort of divulge option on the Yes My Master command card, which gives her bounty and reinforcements, but I'm including her here because I wanted every unit that has bounty. Ventress is effectively just a sort of mega damage homing missile that will probably charge straight at your opponent on kind of turn 2 or turn 3, do a load of damage, then get sort of slowly or sometimes very quickly beaten to death in melee, or your opponent just moves out of melee with her and then she gets shot. But she can probably deal enough damage on that initial attack to maybe get her value back. Kind of quite a swingy dice pool, but maybe we'll get the value you need from her. She has Relentless, which again probably one of the best keywords in the game right now. Opens up the angle for saber throw as well if you want to play as a bit more of a skirmisher. You know, jump up, do the steady lightsaber throw, and then maybe carry on moving or something. Like, lets you play some nice tricks as well, especially if you've got that burst of speed, which gives you some really nice threat range. Jarkai Mastery is great when she gets that independent dodge 1, and she does have ways of getting additional dodge tokens as well, so that's always a really useful trick to have and lets her kind of take that less consistent dice pool with those 8 non-surging black and make them that bit more consistent. Her courage is a bit weird. She is low courage at courage 2, but she has that indomitable, so you can sometimes end up just relying on those red surging dice, which generally are probably going to play ball, but sometimes they won't, and that will just leave you kind of a bit stuck in the open and kind of wondering what you did wrong. Yeah, I think not something that I don't really understand it as a piece of design. It probably would be better if she was just courage 3 and had normal, but yeah, this is maybe something a bit different, I guess, and I guess it's at least a little bit unique. And finally, she has that synergy with Dooku, which you would expect, and it is pretty decent if you can line it up correctly. Like, it is a bit fiddly, as I've spoken about previously in kind of my combos video, but can result in a really big power turn. And if you've not taken the bounty form of Ventress and gone for the Makashi one, it can just be an absolute nuke on any Force user. If you're able to get both the attacks off with them, they're probably not going to survive the turn. So that is definitely something to be aware of, that kind of double combo if you are running into a lot of Force users and want an effective way to deal with them. In terms of her command cards, her 1-pip is the Jedi Hunter one that gives her that surge to crit against Force users, and you can effectively gain a bunch of suppression to get a load of dodges, and dodges are really good for your mastery. So you would hope this basically guarantees you 8 PS2 against if you're attacking a Jedi, and then you'd expect at least 7 PS2 otherwise, which is still really good. And then after that, you can use your 2-pip to perform that free recover action. And then you're able to get off this force choke, which is basically like a super flamethrower, is the way I kind of think about it. And will deal a bunch of damage, especially with that suppressive going in there as well. Also worth noting, because it's the end of her activation, that's on top of your normal attack. So you could jump in, perform a normal attack with your Relentless, and then still use this one as well. So it can be a great, double tap against maybe you're attacking one unit that's nearby, do a bunch of damage to them, and then you can still do that force choke out as well and deal some damage to a different unit. So a really nice combo to have around if you do want to clear sort of 2 units at once, or at least deal a bunch of damage to 2 units at once. I then mentioned her 3-pip. In order for her to be valid in this, you'd have to take the bounty and reinforcements. I think normally you probably want to go the other way. The Makashi Mastery is super nice, and there will probably be at least one unit on your opponent's side that will have access to immune melee pierce, so being able to shut that down is really good. And outmaneuver is a quite useful thing to have, although you probably won't use it that often. I imagine most of your dodges will be saved for damage, but the Makashi Mastery and the Demoralize one are always nice. Demoralize is also good for knocking off standbys, for instance. So yeah, that was a not particularly quick, crikey, it was not particularly quick, tour through all the bounty hunters. Let me know if I missed any. I probably did, but there you go, it happens sometimes. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Remember to vote in the polls on the list review videos that I've been doing recently. I'm excited to see which of those are progressing through to the later rounds. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, etc. And I will see you for the next one.